My name is Edie Dixon, and I am 29 years old. Last week, my parents announced at their wedding anniversary dinner, we are going to Hawaii next week with the entire family for another party. Everybody was happy. Then I asked them, "What time is the departure?" Dad replied, "You don't know because you are not part of us. You can stay behind and take care of all the kids." What I said next, nobody could believe. Before I tell you what I did with the key they threw at me, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? I want to see how far this story travels. The front door slammed shut, echoing through the foyer like a gunshot. Then, the silence rushed in. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a house that knows too many secrets. I stood there for a long time, listening to the fading hum of the limo, taking them to the airport. They were gone. Off to the Maldives. Off to drink champagne I paid for. In a resort I booked. Celebrating a life I subsidized. I looked around the drawing room. It was a disaster zone of their departure. Half-empty flute glasses, discarded wrapping paper, and Ashley's second-best scarf thrown carelessly over the banister. On the mantel, right next to the portrait of my father, shaking hands with the governor, sat a small, golden trophy. Charleston's most promising debutante. It belonged to Ashley. My accomplishments didn't get trophies. My accomplishments got filed away in bank ledgers and tax returns. You might wonder why I stayed. Why I let them treat me like a servant in a house I legally owned. It's a fair question. But you have to understand. Abuse doesn't start with a slap or a scream. It starts with a whisper. It starts with normalization. It's the slow, methodical training that teaches you your worth is conditional. Since I was 7, I learned that affection was a transaction. If I got straight A's, Dad smiled. If I fixed the leaking faucet, Mom hugged me. If I was just Eddie, I was invisible. Over 20 years, that conditioning calcifies. You stop asking for love, and you start asking for tasks. You believe that if you can just be useful enough, profitable enough, silent enough, eventually they will see you. You become an architect of your own prison. Brick by brick. Check by check. I thought I was being a good daughter. I didn't realize I was just being a good asset. I walked over to the window and watched the dust settle on the driveway. They called me the help. They joked that I was staying behind to watch the dogs. The irony was almost funny. They thought they were the royalty of Charleston, living off Richard's shrewd investments. They had no idea those investments dried up a decade ago. They didn't know that the roof over their heads, the clothes on their backs, and the tickets in their hands were all funded by the quiet, boring landscape architect they loved to mock. I wasn't just the help. I was the bank. And the bank had just been closed. I didn't cry. Crying implies loss. And I hadn't lost anything I hadn't already given away years ago. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity. It was the feeling of a contract expiring. I turned away from the mess in the living room. I didn't pick up a single glass. I didn't fold the scarf. Instead, I walked down the hallway to the one room I was never allowed to enter, my father's study. The keypad on the heavy oak door beeped 4 times. 0, 8, 1, 5. My birthday. It was the only place in the entire world Richard Dixon used that date. He didn't use it to buy cards or cakes, but he used it to secure his assets. The irony wasn't lost on me. I turned the handle and stepped into the air-conditioned chill of the study. It smelled of expensive leather and delusions of grandeur. I didn't waste time looking at the framed photos on the desk, all of Ashley winning pageants. Ashley graduating. Ashley smiling. I went straight to the wall safe, behind the painting of the family estate. I entered the code again. The heavy steel door swung open with a smooth, Silent glide. Inside lay the truth of the Dixon dynasty. It wasn't gold bars or stock certificates. It was a stack of paper, bound in a blue legal folder. I pulled it out and laid it on the mahogany desk. I opened it. There it was. The deed of trust. Property address, 12 Oaks Lane, Charleston. Owner of record, Edie Dixon. Beneath that was the lien release from the bank. Dated 3 years ago. Paid in full. Amount, $412,000. Paid by check number 402. Signed by Edie Dixon. And finally, the freshest receipt. The credit card statement for the Platinum business account Richard loved to flash at dinners. He told everyone it was a corporate perk. In reality, it was an authorized user card linked to my personal account. Current balance, $65,400. Merchant, the Royal Maldives Resort. I stared at the numbers. They weren't just figures on a page. They were the quantitative measure of my stupidity. For 3 years, I had let them live in my house, spend my money, and treat me like the help. All because I thought that if I saved them, they might eventually love me. But love isn't a line item on a balance sheet. It's a sunk cost. And I was done throwing good money after bad. I took out my phone and dialed a number I had saved under "in case of emergency." It wasn't the police. It was my lawyer. Mr. Vance. Edie? He answered on the second ring. Is it time? It's time, I said. File the notice to quit. They have 30 days starting today. They're in the Maldives. Edie, they won't see it. Then they will come home to a deadline. Post it on the front door. Certified mail to the resort. Make sure it's legal. Make sure it's ironclad. Consider it done. I hung up. I didn't feel guilty. I felt efficient. I took the blue folder. I walked out of the study and locked the door. I went upstairs to the small guest room they allowed me to sleep in. I didn't pack everything. I didn't pack the clothes I wore to serve them, or the books I read to hide from them. I packed my laptop, my passport, and the hard drive containing 10 years of architectural designs. I walked out of the front door 15 minutes later. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't leave a note. I simply drove away. For the next 2 weeks, while they drank cocktails on a white sand beach I paid for, I was busy building the guillotine. 2 weeks later, the prodigal family returned. They swept into the foyer in a cloud of coconut oil and entitlement, tanned to a deep, expensive bronze. I was standing in the kitchen, checking the inventory list for the gala. I hadn't moved back in. I was just there for the show. But they didn't ask where I'd been sleeping. They didn't ask why the guest room was empty. To them, I was like the refrigerator or the thermostat. They only noticed me if I wasn't working. Edie! Richard shouted, walking past me without making eye contact. And call the pool guy. The water looks cloudy. He tossed his keys onto the counter. They slid across the marble and hit my hand. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. He was a man walking on a trap door, complaining about the draft. Did you hear me? He snapped, loosening his linen collar. I heard you, I said. My voice was level, flat. Good. We have 200 guests arriving in 4 hours. Don't embarrass us. He marched upstairs to nap. That was the hubris. They were so drunk on the illusion of their own importance that they couldn't see the axe hanging over their heads. They assumed the notice to quit I'd mailed to the resort was a mistake. Or a prank. Or most likely they hadn't even opened it. They lived in a reality where consequences were things that happened to other people. I went to the drawing room where Ashley was unpacking her haul. She was pulling silk scarves and jewelry out of a suitcase, throwing the packaging on the floor. When she saw me, her face twisted into a sneer. There you are, she said. She reached down and picked up a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. It had a long, jagged scratch down the side. She threw it at me. It hit my chest with a heavy thud. Your negligence let the dogs chew this. She hissed. That's a $3,000 bag. You're paying for it. Take it out of your little salary, or whatever Dad gives you. I looked at the bag on the floor. I didn't watch the dogs. Ashley. Excuse me? I said I didn't watch the dogs. I boarded them at the kennel 2 weeks ago. Here's the bill. I placed the invoice on the table. She laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. You're useless. Fix the bag. Eddie. Or don't bother showing your face tonight. She stormed off. I picked up the bag. I didn't fix it. I set it on the table. Right next to the eviction notice I had reprinted and placed under the fruit bowl. Then came Patricia, my mother. She bustled in, frantic, holding a black vest and a serving tray. Disaster, she muttered. The second bartender called in sick. Typical. Nobody wants to work anymore. She shoved the tray into my hands. Put this on. You'll have to cover the champagne service. You want me to serve drinks? I asked. At my own house? Don't start. She snapped, adjusting her diamond earrings. Earrings I knew were cubic zirconia because I bought them. We need this night to go perfectly. The senator is coming. Just put on the vest. Keep your head down. And try to smile. You look miserable. And it ruins the aesthetic. She spun me around and pushed me toward the pantry. Go. And don't speak to the guests, unless spoken to. I looked at the cheap polyester vest in my hands. It was the final uniform of my dehumanization. They wanted a servant. They wanted a ghost. I put on the vest. I buttoned it all the way to the top. I wasn't dressing for servitude. I was dressing for war. I picked up the tray. It was heavy. But not as heavy as the secrets I was carrying. Okay. Mom. I said to the empty room. I'll serve. The garden was a sea of linen suits, silk dresses, and old money. I moved through the crowd like a ghost in a polyester vest. I offered champagne to the banker, who had denied my father's loan application 5 years ago. I offered hors d'oeuvres to the neighbor who had sued us over a fence line. They didn't recognize me. To them, I wasn't Edie Dixon, the landscape architect who designed this very garden. I was just a pair of hands holding a tray. I was infrastructure. At 8 o'clock, the music faded. A spotlight cut through the humid evening air, landing on the raised dais at the end of the lawn. Richard stepped into the light. He looked the part perfectly. His tan from the Maldives contrasted sharply with his white dinner jacket. He held a crystal flute in one hand and a microphone in the other. Behind him, a massive projection screen cycled through photos of the trip, Richard on a yacht, Ashley posing with a dolphin, Patricia drinking a coconut on a pristine beach. He tapped the microphone. The feedback whined, then settled into a hum. Friends, neighbors, esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice dripping with rehearsed charm. Thank you for welcoming us home. A polite ripple of applause moved through the yard. I stood in the shadows near the AV booth, my tray heavy in my hands. You know, Richard continued, swirling his wine. People ask me, Richard, how do you do it? How do you maintain a historic estate like 12 Oaks in this economy? He paused for effect, chuckling softly. I tell them it's about vision. It's about making shrewd moves when the market is bleeding. This trip to the Maldives, this jubilee, it wasn't just a vacation. It was a victory lap. I watched the crowd. They were buying it. They nodded. They smiled. They loved a winner. Even if the winner was a fabrication, I spent $65,000 on that trip, he boasted, inflating the number slightly for the audience. Because family is the best investment a man can make. I wanted to show my wife, Patricia, and my daughter, Ashley. That the Dixon legacy is stronger than ever. He gestured to Ashley, who was standing in the front row, beaming. She did a little wave, clutching the scratched Louis Vuitton bag like a prop. To Ashley, Richard said, raising his glass higher. The future of this estate. The one who will carry this torch when I am gone. Then, he looked down. His eyes scanned the front row and landed on me. I was standing 5 feet away, near the stairs. For a split second, his mask slipped. He looked annoyed. He looked at me not with love, not even with recognition, but with the irritation one feels when a piece of furniture is out of place. He pointed a manicured finger at his empty glass, then jerked his chin toward me. A silent command. Refill me. He didn't want me on the stage. He didn't want me in the speech. He wanted me to pour the wine so he could toast to my sister using money he stole from me. That was the signal. The final data point in the audit. He believed he was untouchable. He believed his narrative was the only one that mattered. He was about to find out that facts are stubborn things. I set the tray down on a side table. The glasses rattled. I didn't pick up the wine bottle. I walked up the stairs. Richard frowned. He lowered the mic, hissing through his teeth so only I could hear. What are you doing? Get down. You're embarrassing us. I didn't stop. I walked right up to him. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He was so shocked, so completely blindsided by the malfunction of his appliance, that he let go. I turned to the crowd. The silence was absolute. You're right, Dad, I said. My voice amplified across the lawn. Let's talk about legacy. Richard stared at me. For a moment. He didn't look like a tyrant. He looked like a man trying to read a map in a language he didn't speak. The microphone felt cold and heavy in my hand. A steel baton. I didn't grip it with anger. I gripped it with the precision of a surgeon holding a scalpel. Legacy, I repeated, my voice echoing off the limestone walls of the estate. It's a word we use a lot in this family. But legacy requires ownership. And you can't leave behind what you don't own. I looked up at the AV booth, concealed behind the ivy trellis. I nodded once. The massive projection screen behind me flickered. The photo of Richard holding a marlin on a yacht vanished. In its place, a high-resolution PDF appeared. It was stark, black and white, and 50 feet tall. It was the deed of trust. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It started in the front row with the senator's wife and rolled backward like a wave. This is the legal title for 12 Oaks Estate, I said, pointing to the screen. Dated 3 years ago. Transfer of ownership from the Bank of Charleston to the new sole proprietor. I let the silence stretch. I let them read the bold text at the bottom. Grantee, Edie Dixon. Richard lunged for me. It was a clumsy, desperate movement. He grabbed my arm, his fingernails digging into my skin. Cut the feed, he screamed at the booth, his face a mask of purple rage. She's having a breakdown. She's off her meds. Cut it. I didn't pull away. I just looked at the hand gripping my arm, the same hand that used to sign my permission slips. The same hand that pointed me toward the kitchen when guests arrived. Let go. Dad, I said into the mic. Or I press charges for assault on top of the fraud. He froze. His hand dropped as if it had been burned. Fraud? Patricia shrieked from the side of the stage. She was clutching her pearls. A caricature of a Southern belle in distress. How dare you? We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me a bill. I corrected. And I paid it. I signaled the booth again. The screen changed. Now, it displayed a credit card statement. The numbers were magnified. Undeniable. Account name, Edie Dixon. Authorized user, Richard Dixon. Transaction, the Royal Maldives Resort. Amount, $65. Sea Bay, Lane, the Jubilee trip. I said, reading the line item like I was reading a grocery list. Richard told you he paid for this with market gains. He told you he was a financial genius. The truth is, he paid for it with a card linked to my savings account. A card he was supposed to use for emergency house repairs. I looked out at the sea of linen suits and silk dresses. These were the people my parents had spent 40 years trying to impress. These were the judges, the investors, the socialites. And they were looking at Richard Dixon, not with admiration, but with the one thing he feared more than death: pity. There is a psychological concept called narcissistic injury. It occurs when a narcissist's false self, the carefully constructed image of power and success, is shattered by reality. When you strip away the money, the house, and the title, they don't just feel embarrassed. They feel annihilated. They realize that their power wasn't intrinsic, it was a costume. And I had just turned on the lights in the changing room. Richard wasn't a patriarch anymore. He was just a con artist in a rented tuxedo. You stole from me, I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the garden. You stole my money. You stole my credit. And you tried to steal my dignity by making me serve drinks at a party I paid for. Security, Richard bellowed, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Get her out of here. She's trespassing. Remove her. 2 large men in black suits stepped out from the shadows near the bar. They were the private security firm Richard had insisted on hiring to keep the riffraff out. They walked toward the stage. Richard smirked. He straightened his jacket, thinking the cavalry had arrived. He thought power obeyed him because of who he was. The guards walked past him. They walked past Patricia. They stopped in front of me. Ms. Dixon, the lead guard said, nodding respectfully. What are your orders? Richard's mouth fell open. He looked from the guard to me, his brain unable to compute the shift in gravity. He pays you, Richard sputtered. I hired you. Actually, the guard said, turning his cold gaze to Richard. The contract was signed by the property owner. The check cleared this morning. From Ms. Edie Dixon. I looked at my father. He seemed to shrink, physically deflating inside his white dinner jacket. The illusion of power is a fragile thing. It requires the consent of the governed. And nobody was consenting anymore. My orders? I asked the guard. Yes, ma'am. I looked at the crowd. They were silent, waiting. I looked at Ashley, who was trying to hide behind a potted palm, clutching her scratched bag. I looked at my mother, who was frantically texting someone, probably a lawyer who wouldn't pick up. My orders are simple, I said. I want them off my property. Edie. Wait. Patricia cried out, stepping forward, her voice changing from anger to a wheedling, desperate tone. Baby. Let's go inside. Let's talk about this. We're family. You're just upset about the flight. We can fix this. The flight? It was a dry, humorless sound. You think this is about a plane ticket? You think this is about a vacation? I signaled the booth one last time. The screen went black. The show was over. This is about the last 20 years, I said. And the bill has finally come due. I turned to the guards. Clear the stage. The silence in the garden didn't last long. It was broken by the crunch of tires on gravel. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up the long driveway, followed by a white van with the logo of a local auction house. Richard looked at the police lights, then at me. A flicker of hope crossed his face. He thought he could spin this. He thought he could tell the sheriff his daughter was having a mental health crisis. Thank God, he muttered, adjusting his tie. Officer, over here. The sheriff stepped out. He was a large man who had known my grandfather. He didn't look at Richard. He walked straight to me. Ms. Dixon, he said, touching the brim of his hat. Is the property vacated? Not yet. Sheriff, I said. But the deadline is... I checked my watch. Right now. I turned to my parents. You didn't open your mail. Did you? The certified letter I sent to the resort? Patricia blinked. Confusion warring with panic. What letter? The notice to quit. I said. I served you 30 days ago. Your lease on this property, the one I generously allowed you to have for $0 a month, has been terminated. You have exactly 30 minutes to remove your personal effects before the locks are changed and the asset is seized for liquidation. Liquidation? Ashley shrieked. You're selling our house? My house. I corrected. And yes, it's already sold. The auctioneers are here to inventory the furniture. Richard made a sound like a wounded animal. He looked at the house. The symbol of his identity. The stage for his performance. He realized he wasn't just losing a roof, he was losing his audience. You can't do this, he whispered. We're your family. I know, I said. And that's the only reason I'm giving you 30 minutes instead of 5. I didn't stay to watch them pack. I didn't want to see them shoving their clothes into garbage bags. I didn't want to see the guests awkwardly shuffling to their cars. Realizing they had witnessed the execution of a socialite dynasty, I handed the sheriff the master key. It's all yours. I said. I walked to my car. I didn't look back. I drove through the iron gates of 12 Oaks for the last time. As I hit the main road, I waited for the wave of regret. I waited for the guilt to crush me, but it didn't come. All I felt was the air conditioning on my face and the quiet hum of the engine. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment. It's in the city. It has concrete floors and big windows. There is no crystal here. There is no marble. There is just light. I heard through the grapevine that Richard and Patricia are living in a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Ashley had to get a job as a receptionist. They tell everyone I swindled them. They tell everyone I'm crazy. Let them talk. I'm not listening anymore. But I want to say something to you. To the person watching this who is still in the house. To the person who is still paying the bills. Still taking the insults. Still waiting for them to change. There is a specific kind of guilt that comes when you walk away. It feels like you've committed a murder. You feel like you've abandoned a child. Even if that child is your 60-year-old father. You wonder if you were too harsh. You wonder if you should have tried one more time. I'm here to tell you that guilt isn't a sign you did something wrong. It's a sign you're a human being who was trained to carry a load that wasn't yours. Putting it down feels weird because you've been carrying it for so long your muscles have warped around it. But you have to put it down. You have to burn the bridge to stop yourself from running back into the fire. I'm Edie Dixon. I used to be an invisible architect. Now, I'm just Edie. And for the first time in my life, that is enough. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to stop yourself from drowning, share this story. You aren't crazy. And you aren't alone.